Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Gyeongseong Creatures Season 2, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So the opening of this episode picks up when Cheok wakes up in the water, and who knows whether she was just in a fugue state in between then and then waking up in a house surrounded by bodies. The only survivors are maybe children, probably a brother and sister. And she's like, did I do this? And it's like, well, we know how this situation ravages a person. Now, yeah, she may be human, but I guess took a long time and plenty of solitude to finally get it under control. That's probably also why later on she's like, yeah, I don't work with people. Why she keeps a distance from people. She doesn't really interact with people at all just because she doesn't want to take the chance she might kill someone. Because she didn't just kill people in that house. She stepped outside and she had massacred that entire village. Those two kids might be the only survivors in that village. So now you have extra reason why she never went to go see Jang. Understandably, but it's right, she's watching as Korea had just gotten free because the wars ended and Korea just gained its independence. And she watches Jang and everything, and she leaves. And I think there's interesting line where she's basically spring had come to Korea. She's like, but for her, winter never ended, and it keeps on going. And it feels like the moment she's reunited with Jang, it feels like for the first time in all these years, her life has started moving again. The cogs of time just started moving again, and she's so overwhelmed by emotion. But then Hojae's like, who are you? I think you got the wrong person. And she's like, wait, you're not Master Jang? He's like, I have no idea who that is. And she's walking away. And they have this little repertoire, this back and forth is very reminiscent of their first meeting, of just her being like, okay, let's work. He's like, let's work together. And she's kind of like, no, let's not get involved. I don't like working with anybody. Just keep your distance. Because in her head, it's like, I've got to be crazy. Because how could it be Jang? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. He may look like him, but I was just so overwhelmed with emotion that I haven't seen him in so long. I assumed he lived his life and died, and I just but now knowing what this is all is, because she explains right, I was looking for the victim from episode 1 because I was hired to find a missing person, and by the time I showed up he was dead. And Jang was like, yo, Hojae is like, oh, let's work together, and she tries to hit him again, and he's like, yo, I don't get hit a second time or something like that. But it's just because she's struggling, so because she doesn't want to hold, she's afraid to get too close to anyone in general. But now it's just because she's like, I don't think I can really separate you looking like him. My brain is telling me it can't be him, but my heart is saying it is. So it also clarifies some things of what this is all about, so it seems like for the past couple decades, maybe some of this stuff has been happening in secret. I mean, why would she think any of this is still happening? Because none of it's popped up in the time she's been here. Once again, who knows if she stayed in Korea all this time? Probably has, maybe from the shadows or something like that. More specifically, maybe she stayed in Seoul the entire time and just watched everything change and just lived in solitude. I mean, that's also another thing. When you've lived that long, you watch so many people grow old and die. It's you keep yourself hidden by not getting too close to people, because people start noticing, you're not aging. So there's that. 2, you don't want to get attached to people just so you could end up losing them, having lost your mom, considering her circumstances, your dad, and Jang. So it's of course you don't want to go through that again. But either way, it's just interesting to know that in all this time she's been here, this is the first incident of stuff popping off. Because she's never, they talk about it, these murders have only happened, the cops are these murders have only happened in the past 2 months. And this is the only reason why there's any cross-section is because the victim from last episode just happened to work for the biotech company, which is connected to all this. And she just happened to be called upon looking into this missing persons report. Who knows if the other people they might not have been necessarily missing. So it just happened to be so much overlapped last episode with everything. Hojae's the case him and Yoon-gil were investigating, and the same thing for Sheok. So like I say, it's just fate working in a very interesting way. So there's twofold things that happen. let's start off with the Hojay situation when he comes back and he brings up the Master Jang to Yeongseong, and I was like, wait, what's going on there? I was like, you're acting super sus, dude. He was like, the moment he was like, yeah, I don't know where you would have heard that from. I was like, so you know. So I was like, what's going on there? Once again, his grandfather was tied to Jang, so that's why I was like, could there be something there? Like, I was like, are you meant to keep an eye on Jang? And it seems like that is the case as we find out later on. Well, it heavily hints to it later on, but I'm like, huh. Because we find out, because all of this has got Jang wanting to know, Hojay wanting to know about his past. Because, let me bounce back and forth between stuff. Because the killer, we found out his name is Seong-jo. He took a very interesting interest in that picture last episode. And I was like, oh, does he know Jang or something? But it's like, he knows him as Hojay. He doesn't know him as what was Jay's name? Was it like Taeyong? Maybe it was like Taeyong Jang. Maybe, I don't remember. But he doesn't know him as like the Jang we knew from season 1. He knows him as who he is kind of now, Hojay. Maybe, whatever the case may be. He went to Madame Na to get Silver Bill to look into this. So it's like, right, and immediately she recognizes, like, that's my drawing of Mr. J. Oh, crap. So she tries to rush over to Madame Na, but the moment before she could get there, he'd already killed her. Just to make a point, because I guess it's like, right, you're the person that gives Silver Bill her jobs. Because he doesn't know about Shiok's circumstances. He just assumes, like, okay, you're another loose end in all of this that needs to be wrapped up. So I'm coming after, like, anyone that is some loose thread in this. So that's why he killed Madame Na, because she also wouldn't give him any information. But it's like, right, but you're still a loose end that needed to be taken care of anyway. So there's that. At the same time, Hojay is dealing with Jisoo. It's the detective's name. I love that she came to his place to show off the files and tells him, like, yeah, there's been 5 murders, missing eyeball, and the brain, because you're like, right, these creatures love snacking on brains. And I love that she's like drinking, and then she's trying to do it. He's like, oh, like, that might be a terrible spot for that bug. And she just kind of grabs it and it's like, I'm sorry. He's like, no, it's perfectly fine. He's like, did I scare you? And I love that she does, like, when she's about to leave later on, I was like, oh, you're going to put it back? It's like, well, I guess he's going to assume his place is bugged, or maybe he's going to be like, well, I saw you pull the bug out, so there's no way you would go back and double back and bug the place, would you? Whatever the case may be. She definitely didn't tell her superior officer, like the veteran detective or whatever, that she did that. Because he's like, oh, you're sitting there listening to music. It's like, keep an eye on Hojay. And it's like, well, she is, because she's got the place bugged, but he wasn't home at the time, so. But yeah, they roll up at the crime scene, and Seong-jo ends up calling, because he saw what she could do. He's like, oh, she was on top of the building and she jumped down. I don't know if he necessarily put 2 and 2 together. He just saw this person. It's like, oh, that person's interesting. And he broke into her apartment, but I don't think he put 2 and 2 together that she's like them. Like, he thought, oh, maybe there's something else to her. But it's not until she chased after him. I love that, where it's like, he's in the crowd nearby, like in a very, oh, let me look at the crime scene of my work. He was nearby, and she heard the crowd outside over the phone, and that let her pinpoint him out. Chased after him. Hojay shows up and chases after her as well, and the 2 of them duke it out. And he's surprised because he's like, wow, you should have a broken neck like about all the punching I've done to you, but you're still standing. And he's like, what are you? And he's like, oh, wow, you're one of us, and let me see if you really are, like, how much you can take. And he, like, does the tendril things and stabs her. But then Hojay shows up. But then that's what stops him. Because he was wondering why she had a picture of Hojay. He even said, like, when, like, Madame Na was sending the information to Shiok, it said, like, oh, he's been missing for, like, a year. And the way he was looking at Hojay, you're like, oh, he actually does know him. I was like, that's interesting. I was like, why are you so... So it's like, in that moment, because he was almost shocked to see Hojay, because he's like, oh, why do you have a picture of him? He went missing, maybe is presumed dead. But it's like, oh, this woman just happens to have this rough sketch of him. It's like, what's that all about? And now you're seeing him in front of you, which there must be history there, and it's kind of a thing. Like, he didn't stick around long enough for you to really find out, but it's probably a thing of there's history there, and he bounces, and Hojay takes her to a hospital where she's kind of drifting in and out, and I thought it was so beautiful, but also so heartbreaking when she kind of wakes up and she's back at like Master Jang's place. What was it? The House of Golden Treasure. What was that? That was the name, I think. But he was like, "Oh, was it a dream?" She's like, "Oh, it was like a horrid dream." And he's like, "Well, a dream is a dream, and no matter what, I'll always be by your side." And when like she wakes up and he's there, she's like holding onto his hand, and it's almost like, "Yeah, I don't want you to leave. I do want you by my side." And he holds on to her bracelet because she ends up dropping it. But yeah, she ended up running away. Which, yes, there would have been a whole bunch of questions about, because I was like, well, it's going to take a while because her healing factor. Well, for one, she got like probably regular damage, like gunshots and stuff, probably would take a little less time to heal. But because there were wounds from another being like her, it probably is a situation of like it was more extensive and it just took longer to recover. Or maybe because she's not fully monsterfied, because of that, it ended up like her healing factor is not as strong as it would be if she was like full, like, because she's still human enough that that healing factor isn't as strong as it could or should be. But Seong-jo gets the ever-living piss slapped out of him to the point his mouth is bleeding because like home dude came in hitting him, slap, 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 slap. Because wasn't he the one co-signing Seong-jo killing home dude from last episode? But he kind of makes it seem like, nah, you kind of did that on your own. Definitely to Madam Na, that was not something he was supposed to do. But he's like, yeah, I'm doing good. Like, you should be happy that I did that. And he was just kind of like, no, you step out of line again, you're going to have a problem. And just as he was walking away, Seong-jo's like, yo, like, it's Hojay still alive or whatever. And home dude stops, but then keeps it going. And another one of the guys is like, yo, you ever say that name again, I'll gut you. So you're like, so there's more than one of them. Like, they're not full monsters, but they are monster-esque, just like Shiaki is. The question becomes like, well, how long have they all been like that? Like, were they experiments too? Well, some of them seem they were experiments, or at least maybe some of them co-signed on this situation. Who knows? Whether they were voluntary subjects or involuntary subjects. This place has a history of involuntary subjects, so. But it's like, what is all of that in connected? What does it all mean? Because, like I said, it just. So, do the others, does at least the head guy know that Hojay is alive? Because the opening bike section in the first episode, once again, it's like, was that the past, the future? It's like, but it's like, no, it definitely seemed like the past, because it's like, oh, you need to forget. So, once again, Hojay has the, like, surgery marks in the back of, like, on his back from what we can see from his neck or something. There's also what we find out from Yeong-gil, that essentially Hojay has amnesia. Like, he was in an accident a year ago. Yeong-gil's the one that filled him in to some extent about who he is and stuff like that. But I guess up until this point, he's never really cared enough. But now there's stuff making him go like, wait, what's going on? That woman, Shiak, is calling me Master Jang. I learned from one of our antennas, one of our people out there in the street, like that apparently the place where current, like this business, is what used to be the House of the Golden Treasure or whatever. And it's like, so the person who ran this place back then was Jang. I wonder is that lady, like the antennas, like, because she says, like, basically it's like Jang ran that place when her mom was around. So I was like, interesting. So I was like, I wonder, were you not born? The fact that she doesn't even really know it must mean she wasn't even born at that time. So she must have came after it was already gone, maybe? I don't know. Or maybe who knows how long Jang held on to that place before, someone else. Like, I mean, Yoon-gil's grandfather apparently, like, owned, like, who knows if, like, eventually Jang sold that place or gave it to him, and it kind of was inherited into his family. But was he also can't take anything Yeong-gil says at face value, considering he's lying to Young-jae, being like, not Young-jae, to Jang about like, oh, like, you were flying the rage, you were this, you were that, trying to like scare him. So it's like, right, don't worry about who you were in the past, just focus on and the good graces and how happy you are now. That's what you should focus on, because who you were before was a terror. You were unhappy, you were this, you were that. But like I said, considering how he still looks the same way he does, the way Cheok does, it begs the question: when did Jang become experimented on? Was it it had to be a long time ago then? Because it doesn't seem like there's a age regression on that. Maybe it could be, but I'd assume it's like around that time, all those years ago, is when he got like experimented on, and now it's just. But it's like all that went down, him losing his memories and stuff, only happened a year ago. So was that him breaking away? Like I said, does that main dude know, he has to know he's still alive, or does he think Ho-Jae is dead? Like after he did that, like wiped his memories, or was that a favor to M? We'll get to that later. Like who knows who's on what side and who knows what when? Because definitely Seongjo had no idea that Ho-Jae was still alive. Or didn't know what his circumstances were. What's interesting about Seongjo too is he picks up a picture, and I was like, is that Myung? I was like, wait, are we implying like he's because I was about to say, it was like the baby that the Colonel took in season 1, like Myung's baby. I was like, so that was him? So I was like, is he a natural born then? Because she was obviously infected while she was pregnant. She got infected while she was still pregnant, so her baby's kind of a natural born. And the last thing we saw was like the doctor leaving, which the doctor is the founder of this corporation. Was it Gyeongseong Biotech? Like that, the older guy that's kind of seen as like the previous chairman was like, that is the colonel, right? That Japanese colonel who was running things, right? Maybe not. I think it might be the same guy. Maybe it's not. Because they keep showing such emphasis on the previous chairman. I'm like, that's got to be him, right? Considering, like, all of this was his baby. Like, he was the one that was obsessed with all of this, so it only makes sense for him to start the company. Just like we found out the place that Young-gil and Ho-Jae are at is the House of Golden Treasure. So it's like, as I was saying last episode, I was like, that place has to be the hospitals that he was running his experiments in, right? And it seems like it might be the case, considering like the connection all these locations have. Speaking of the biotech company, the experiments that was kind of set up at the end of last episode, they had a guy go down there, and there's not just one, there are 3 monsters. 2 of them look a little different. They kind of all look the same, but like the 2 other ones look pretty different. The one in the middle, the last one, looked a lot like Sheok's mom did. So that's interesting with the tendrils and stuff. And the guy is telling him like, yo, stand still. And it's like, if you run, they'll kill you. And he panicked and got killed. And then, like, it seems like one of those things is inside of him as well, because the creature flings it towards, like, the glass ceiling. So the question then becomes, like, okay, because it's like, oh, you can't get those things down there under control. So I'm like, are you experimenting on turning these people into, like, having, like, mind control power over these creatures? Because these things are so beyond their control. So I'm like, are you implanting the Najin or some version of the Najin into these people so they can control the monsters? Like, is it, all these... Because it doesn't seem like he's the same as, like, Seonjo and the others. I mean, even that main dude, the current chairman, is like, yo, the previous chairman decided to give you the Najin and ended up, he chose you and yada, yada, yada. So, which once again, how many of those was that something he chose for himself? Which I highly doubt it, because if that's the colonel from last season who ran all of this, he never had volunteer people. It was always like, oh, I'm going to take you and do what I want. So maybe that's also correlates to the Ho-Jae situation. Maybe he was hoping to give Ho-Jae freedom from all of this, where the rest of them have no escape. He wanted to at least give Ho-Jae a chance, but it's like, you can't remember any of this in order for that to happen. I don't know. Like I said, not unless he is under the impression he's dead, because the moment, like I said, Seong Jo mentioned it, he stopped but kept it moving afterwards because he didn't want to make it seem like it affected him, but it did. He tried not to let it read on his face, but it did affect him, hearing Ho Jae's name and him being mentioned, to the point the other dude's like, yo, you say that name again, I'm gonna rip you apart. So he must have been like a traitor to them in some regards. It's like, yo, we're a brotherhood because we're all in this together. We're all kind of the same. We're not alone. And you decided to abandon us, type of thing. Maybe that's what kind of turned them all against him. But we also had the end of the episode where Sheok shows up and asks Ho-jae, like, oh, like, does that previous offer still stand of us kind of working side by side? Because I think it's, for one, she wants to keep him nearby in case shit happens, because what happened to Madame Na, and it's like, well, I know he's taken an interest in you because of that photo, but I think it's also that moment in the hospital, even though she was kind of like fading in and out, holding onto his hand, and that promise from Jang of like, great, I'll always be by your side, I think made her kind of go like, I want you by my side until I can for one, it's going to help me figure this all out, try to understand all of this, but also I just want you by my side, you know? I think there's a lot in that, like, there's layers to it. You're a mystery to be solved, but I also want you by my side, considering she spent so long alone. Like I said, for her, I think for the first time, spring is coming, because it's been winter for so long. Like I said, her time stopped all those decades ago, and now for the first time, it feels like that time is moving. She's moving and kind of breathing new life for the first time in a long time. So that's how I'm reading it. And then there's also the stinger at the end of the episode, which I talked about this. No, I didn't talk about it. I might have accidentally stumbled across an accidental spoiler. The person that Young Gil answers a phone call from, it's a lady in a kimono, because like it looks like a Japanese setting, and so you're like the M, and I think I saw the character's name, and like when I was looking up, like trying to remind myself of characters' names and stuff, and I think that's supposed, like I said, especially with the Japanese setting, I'm like, is that supposed to be Maeda? Which would make sense, because she was completely and utterly obsessed with Jang. She was very possessive when it came to Jang. So she was in love with him and stuff. So, but it's like, wow, you're still alive? If that's because you were like, what? Maybe you were in your early, even if you were in your early 20s or mid 20s, you're like 100 now? I was like, wow. Has that been keeping you going? Like, why? Has she had an eye on him the entire time? I mean, we know you got rid of like Myung for the purposes of her and your Ishikawa, your husband, were having an affair, and you were in love with Jang. So I'm like, is that why you were trying to keep him around, or like did you have any? You would have to have something to do with it, considering you've got Young Gil like looking after him. Not unless that's like Maeda's like child or something, continuing her mother's like obsession or something. Like, that's the only thing I can, because like I said, the name said like Lady Maeda, like what I stumbled across. So like I said, it's kind of a slight spoiler, but it's like, that's not definitive, but it's like I said, just because of what I accidentally stumbled across, that's kind of my own fault. Kind of fits, and like I said, it looked like a Japanese setting with like like I said, she's wearing a kimono, I believe, and it just like it looked like, you know, Japanese architecture. But like I said, I could have been wrong about that. But you know, maybe I'm saying like putting two and two together and trying to get four, when in actuality it's not 2 and 2, it's 1 and 3. That's a terrible analogy, but I hope you get the point I'm trying to make. Some very, very interesting developments. I'm curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.